Well, welcome back to Cool Conversations. We had a week off last week. I'd like to say it was a technical hitch, but it wasn't. I was having some fun in the Italian Alps, getting back to the grassroots and getting back in the mountains. Now, we are on location once again. Before we start, I've got to say a massive, massive thank you to the TCA down in Bristol, Paul, who's allowed us to use this fantastic facility here in Bristol. And one of the regulars is my guest tonight. I first met the guy here 20 years ago.
Must be 20 years ago.
I went round to see a friend in Argentière, just above Chamonix in France. This is in winter time. And there was a blonde-haired guy hanging out of a window doing a bit of DIY. And I was looking for this friend of mine, and there's this blonde-haired guy, as I said, clearly from the southwest. He had that southwest accent. He's like, "All right, mate, can I help you?" And about 2 days later, I think we were climbing Charlie Gallini, one of the little galops at the end of the Argentière Glacier. Now, this guy, Matt Helliker, he was one of my ushers. He's been a very dear friend for a very long time. And John Bracey, who was on Cool Conversations number 18, once described Matt as the real deal. This guy will crush alpine ice. This guy pulls down so hard on rock that it's unreal. He's a training fiend, and we have him for the next hour or so, thanks to Paul at TCA. Matt, I've not seen you for a very long time.
Yes.
How are you?
I'm good, Kenny. Yeah, no, it's great to see you.
I don't get called Kenny very often these days. No, there's a blast and a blast. That's nice.
Okay, yeah, no, I mean, yeah, we haven't seen each other properly in a long time or had a catch up. So as soon as you asked me to come on, I was like, yeah, definitely, game on, well up for that. Just a bit of a catch up, but with my old mate, which we've not seen properly in quite a while. Yeah,
so it's late at night here. It's what we're pushing, but it's gone 10 o'clock. And we are, as I said, in the climbing wall in Bristol. You've been here pretty much all afternoon, haven't you? You live here.
Yeah, this is my second home at the moment, actually. Yeah, I mean, actually, I've been here since about 11 o'clock today. So
you've been here since 11 o'clock.
Yeah, a bit savage, but I'm stretching the training out a little bit. I'm resting in between, but yeah, it's been quite a long day.
So just tell me, tell the viewers, tell the listeners, right now you are. So, as I said, Bracey once called you the real deal. You ski like a demon. You know, as I say, you've got a fantastic alpine climbing record, snow, ice, mixed ground. But for the last couple of years, at least to the outsider, to me, it looks like you've been really focused on hard rock climbing and then also hard alpine rock.
Yeah.
Maybe you could just try and define the difference there a little bit.
Yeah, I guess the thing is, for me, I've kind of really tried to plan my life out in a way, which is a bit random, because I really feel that, I do like performing well in all aspects of climbing. I mean, I think it's a real challenge with climbing to be performing at a high level in sport climbing, in trad climbing, in alpine climbing, in mixed climbing. It's very difficult to get those things well balanced, because you can be very good at sport climbing, and that translates well to trad climbing, but then to sometimes try and put that into an alpine setting, the training that you've done for those aspects don't necessarily work for alpinism, because of the fact that you can't even walk to the mountain because you're knackered, because you're not doing any cardio, apart from just pulling down on tiny bits of wood. So striking that balance is really, really difficult. And certainly for me, I kind of made a decision like 2 years ago, and I thought, right, I really want to hit my personal maximums in my rock climbing. And the thing with rock climbing is that it's very power based. And as we well know, we're not getting any younger. I'm coming up to 40 this year.
Well, I'm coming up to 50, so let's not dwell on that too much.
But I was thinking, and I've been speaking to many people about this, that naturally our power is going to start decreasing when we get to 45. Mm-hmm. So you're already in trouble, Kenny. You're gonna have to
Well, I'm still on the quest. I've never climbed AA, and I did say to myself a few years ago that by the time I'm 50, I want to climb 8A. And for those of you who are listening and don't know, 8A is a I know you climb way harder, but it is a bit of a benchmark grade.
It's a benchmark grade. I mean, 8A, you know, certainly back in the 90s, if you were climbing 8A, early 90s, you were like absolutely crushing. And
don't put me down too much. I mean, I've yet to climb it,
but you know, but it's doable for you for sure. But certainly for me, I kind of got to a point where I was like, I really need to try to hit these maximums, and I only have basically 5 years to do it. So I've trained very specifically just for pulling hard on rock recently. I really wanted to do a trad route called Big Issue last year. That was a really big dream of mine from a young age.
It is a stunning line. So the Big Issue, was it originally bolted by Pete Oxley?
It was originally bolted, and then
John Dunn stripped the bolts.
John stripped the bolts. Yeah.
Trad ascent.
Trad ascent of it. And it's had a few ascents since.
Yeah, it's only had a handful.
Only a handful.
Steve McClure do it?
Yeah, Steve McClure done it, and Kath, and yeah, quite a few people. But there's one guy in particular that did it, a guy called Ali Kennedy, who did it when it hadn't been done for a long time. And Ali kind of did it and kind of brought it back into vogue, if you like. And I remember just climbing in Pembroke, you know, as a kid, and you know, climbing well below the grade that I'm climbing at now, and just looking at this wall coming out of the sea, and it's this like tiger striped,
it's pretty impressive,
beautiful, you know, orange and black and yellow streaks, very steep wall, like comes out, and there's like seals bobbing around. It's a really amazing place to climb. And I remember looking at it when I was a kid and thinking, wow, there's absolutely no way I'm going to get anywhere near that. And I went back there after I'd done a couple of harder ascents on trad a few years ago. And I looked down at it again, and I just suddenly thought, well, actually, maybe if I'm very specific in how I train, maybe it is possible for me. And I've definitely got to that mindset now that really in rock climbing, anything is actually possible if you basically just keep going at it. Because, you know, your body adapts. Your body will always adapt. And initially, the moves on Big Issue felt absolutely desperate for me, absolutely desperate. I couldn't touch anything. And then suddenly things start connecting, you know, the moves start feeling easier, the sequences start to flow. And linking those dots is a really satisfying thing for a climber who's trying to perform at kind of a hard level. And I did Big Issue, and it was, you know, it's like an E9 6C, so it's a fairly high grade in the trad.
It's super high grade.
Super high grade, yeah. But it also actually made me think, actually, like, what else is really possible for me in my rock climbing, giving myself this 5-year limit of when my power is going to start going downhill, and I'm going to basically start going against the grain to kind of climb my maximum. And I've also got this thing that I really want to climb 9A as well on sport. And that is what I'm kind of gunning for at the moment, and that's what I'm training for at the moment, to try and climb 9A on sport climbing.
So just put that into perspective, because listenership, viewers, they're all over the place. I mean, you know, we have runners, we have climbers. 9A is just beneath the pinnacle of the very top end, which we have globally at the moment. Yeah,
9A is...
I just want to say, you're the first person that's had a phone ping.
Oh, sorry.
I don't care. No, that's brilliant.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah.
I mean, it's properly
hard.
E9 is hard, 8A is hard,
yeah,
but 9A is...
Yeah,
it's really hard.
It's really hard, yeah. And obviously the difference for people who are not fully aware is that obviously E9 trad climbing, you're climbing and you're placing gear. You know, you're placing your wires and you're placing your cams in the rock. You know, there is no protection in the rock. So trad climbing is very different to sport climbing, whereas sport climbing is obviously very much about basically pulling as hard as you can safely, because there are bolts to protect yourself. So sport climbing is more about, I would say, performance, and trad climbing is more about the experience in a way.
But the big issue It is safe though, isn't it? I mean, okay, if you fumble the gear placements and you put some rubbish gear placements in, you're going to go an awful long way. But essentially, because it is a big overhanging leaning wall, I've looked down it. I mean, I've seen pictures of you abseiling down it, and you're struggling to get in to clean holds and to work the route. If you get the gear in, essentially, it is a safe trad route.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's a hard, technical, powerful route.
Yeah, the gear on it, like you said, if you get it in and you place it right, the gear is very good. And I took a fall from quite high up on the route, and I went quite a way, but the gear held, and and as you said, it's steep, so you're just basically falling into midair. It's not like a nasty fall onto a slab or anything.
So to take it back, I mean, it'd be really interesting. I don't think, I mean, we've known one another for a long time. I'm sure we've had debates when we were living together in France and things like this. What are your views on something like a big issue being bolted up in the first place? And I'm not going to take anything away from, it was Pete Oxley, wasn't it?
I think it was Pete Oxley.
I'm going to take nothing away because it takes a visionary like that to push standards sometimes. But what would your take on that and the evolution of that route? Because Pembroke is generally considered a no-bolt zone.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think certainly after doing it, I mean, it is protectable by trad gear. And I mean, for sure, there are sea cliffs out there that have bolts in them, but they're generally very compact limestone sea cliffs where there is no place for natural protection.
So Dorset is the
down in Swanage and down in Portland and like at Breen locally here. But whereas certainly Pembroke, the rock really lends itself very well to trad climbing because the rock is solid. The placements that you make once you place them are generally okay. So no, I mean, so for sure, big issue to be bolted. Probably at that time, because the level of climbing was lower, maybe the thought of going at it trad climbing just felt completely wild.
When was it first done? Was it back in the mid
90s? Yeah, I don't know exactly when.
Might be even before that.
Could have been. I think, or maybe 92 actually. I think when John did it, John Dunn did it.
So John Dunn did it in 92?
I think it was 92, 93 potentially.
Well, long time ago.
Yeah, a long time ago. But that was one thing that what I really wanted to do is that it has had subsequent ascents, but on gear. So people would abseil down, they'd place the gear, and then they'd lead it with the gear in.
Yeah.
And that is a completely different story to basically having the gear on your rack and then placing the gear as you climb. And for me, I really wanted to climb it placing all my gear on lead because for a pure sort of trad ascent, that is more meaningful to me, for sure.
And it makes it a magnitude harder. I remember years ago when I lived in Sheffield, around the corner was John Aaron, who at the time was arguably one of the best all-round rock climbers in the UK, both bolts and trad. And he had a little training cellar. I mean, we're surrounded by these big colossal walls of the TCA right here, but he had a tiny weeny cellar with a cellar board in. And he had about 10 meters of rope. And he had the circuit set up, and you could do the circuits, and then you tie the rope to surround your waist, and then you have some quick draws, some carabiners, and you have to stop, find the right body position, make the clip, and all of a sudden those circuits became almost twice as hard.
Absolutely.
Because you're having to stop, find the body position, pull the rope, clip, and move on.
Yeah.
Add that to the fact that you're having to place the gear and I presume there's a scare factor.
There's definitely a scare factor, and also some of the critical pieces of gear that you place on that route, they're a bit wiggy to get in, and sometimes
Is that the technical term? A bit wiggy.
You know what wiggy?
Yeah, I know what wiggy. I know what you mean.
A bit difficult to get in, and also some of the pieces are, you put the wire in and you try to make it sit properly, and then it sits, but it doesn't sit quite right, and you look at it, and you're like, oh, that's not right. But then because it's already been sat in the rock, it's then really difficult to then get it back out to then try to resit it properly to make yourself feel comfortable. And I remember actually on the ascent, I placed one of the critical pieces really badly. I just had to kind of move away from that piece and think, well, okay, if I come off, then hopefully it will stay. But it was a really memorable, route and experience for me. For sure.
That was last summer, wasn't it?
That was last summer.
Yeah, because I remember where do you call home these days? Because you lead quite a nomadic life. You've got a place out in Chamonix in France. I know you spend quite a lot of time here. Your dad's got a place down near Wales
down in
somewhere.
Wales, yeah.
You've just been up in the lakes, according, by looking at Instagram. I don't know what you were doing up in the lakes, but you've been up in the lakes. And we were talking downstairs, and you were saying you're probably here for another 4 or 5 days, and then you're back to France after that?
Yeah, I think, back to France, because, I have a van, so I'm in my van a lot. I think last year I was in my van about like 8 months of the year. Because I was in the Dolomites a lot last year. I was trying to free a hard free route on Cima Grande on its north face, which is absolutely fantastic. That was with Emma Twyford. I just seem to spend a huge amount of time in the van, which actually is good and also is quite bad as well. It gives you that element of freedom, for sure.
Yeah, but having shared a house with you and knowing what your feet are like, you still got rotten feet? It must get pretty bad in the van.
Because we lived together, didn't we, for a few years, and it does get pretty rough.
Do you remember that chimney fire we had?
Oh, I do actually. That's in Mont-Saxon, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's in Mont-Saxon, yeah. So I've got a house out in France, and there's a little bit of an aside, but this is meant to be all about you, but it is a great story. We had a chimney fire, and you were up in your bedroom, and I forget exactly what was going on, but the chimney catches fire. I realise it's caught fire, and I think Nick Bullock was with us, Grandad. Yeah. And the chimney starts roaring, and I'm like, oh my God, it's a wooden house. Thinking, oh my God, what's going on? We rushed upstairs. And Matt, the chimney's on fire. You're like, what? We all run downstairs, and there was this like a device that you throw on the fire, and it erupts, but it sucks all the air out.
Yeah, I remember that.
And we had flames coming out out the chimney, and it was insane. I think it was in winter time. I can't remember.
It was in winter, because actually, I think
I think you were outside in your underpants and bare feet, and of course there's snow everywhere.
Yeah, and the chimney's like, this huge like blaze above, like some burner over in a sort of Port Talbot, Yeah,
it was pretty.
But actually, I was actually thinking about this as well. Like, when was the last time me and you climbed together? And it was that winter. It was me, you, and it was with Grandad, Nick Bullock.
Yeah, no, we've climbed in Cheddar a few times.
Have we since?
Yeah.
But our last alpine route was definitely then.
Yeah, it's on the Grand Jurassic.
It was on the Jurassic. Yeah. I can remember that. I remember that. That was so. Oh my God.
Yeah, it was.
It was pretty grim actually, because we were in ski boots.
Quarter McIntyre.
Remember we skied in like.
And we did it in a day. We went up and down in a day. We got picked up by Ross Hewitt on the backside.
That's right. Because I remember we went in like a bit old school, wasn't it? Like really heavy ski boots. They were like, Nick was in some lasers which weighed like 5 kg.
Those ski boots, I got rid of those ski boots. They fell to pieces on me in Alaska 2 years ago.
Really?
Yeah.
But I always remember on that trip where we came off the back. So we went up and over in a day. We went down the back and we were a bit trashed. We missed the hut.
Yeah, the Boca Electric hut. So what we're talking about? We're talking about the Grand Jurassic.
Yeah.
So there's 6 north faces. One is the Cima Grande, which you did the very hard ascent on, and another one is the north face of the Grand Jurassic. Yeah. And we did an ascent of what's known as the Quarter McIntyre, which didn't really see that many ascents back then.
No.
We went up in a day. And we came down, so it was about 24 hours of climbing.
Yeah, it's brutal.
Pretty worked at the end of it.
But I do remember when we missed the hut, we were like all a bit trashed, and we got to this cliff band, and we're like, let's just sit down in the snow. And we sat down in the snow.
I think we all fell asleep.
Well, this is the thing. We sat down in the snow for about an hour, and then we were then really cold, and we're like, let's get moving again. I remember we went to the top of the cliff band. I went down the abseil first, and you and Nick were on the belay. Well, I remember like doing a pitch down on the abseil, and like, okay, Kenny, okay, come on, come down. And I was like, and there's like nothing. I'm like, Kenny, Nick, Kenny, and like nothing. And you guys had fallen asleep on the ledge.
And we've fallen asleep on the ledge.
And I was like hanging off the bottom rope, ready for you guys to come down. I remember screaming at you for about 15 minutes, and you boys were kipping.
We were asleep on the top, and then we get Ross Hewitt round to pick us up.
That's right.
Yeah, I think that was probably our last alpine route together. I mean, one of the interesting things when you climb with people, and we're going to get onto your climbing partnership with John Bracey in a moment. But sometimes you climb with people who have the ability to bring out the very best in others. And certainly for me, you've always been one of those people. So I don't rock climb anywhere near as hard as you. And I remember being in, it must have been Cheddar, you hang out in Cheddar.
Yeah.
And I hadn't been climbing for ages. And next thing I know, I'm on a route which is way too hard for me. You put the quick draws in, slapping my way up. And somehow getting to the top because there is a positive energy coming up the rope.
Yeah, absolutely.
From you. And you are, if I ever need, if I was going to climb at 8A, and it will be at my absolute limit, I would need something like you to be there because you have this innate ability to bring out the best in those around you.
I think that's, but I think, I feel that with the people I climb with towards me as well. And, and I'm actually really selective with who I climb with. And I would rather...
Is that why you don't climb with me anymore?
Well, yeah. No. I would climb with you if I could get hold of you, The thing is, I really find that, my sort of community of climbers who I climb with is actually very, very small. Because for me, that whole feel of encouragement, of positivity that comes up the rope is actually so important for me in terms of how I perform, but also in terms of how enjoyable the day is. And I would much rather go training for the day and see benefit from my training as opposed to go climbing with somebody just to hold my rope because of the fact that I want to go climbing outside. Because for me, it's about going climbing with your mates and having really cool experiences with your mates and feeling that positivity. Because if you're trying to climb at your limit, you are never going to when someone who you don't have a connection with is holding your rope. You just won't. You have to really feel the love from that person. And that is where I think climbing is a very, very important thing because it does bring people together. And I don't know anything else where it does bring those bonds, and it's like with us, we climbed a lot in the past, but then when we see each other again, there's a bond, and I think and that's where climbing is amazing because it actually does give you that where I don't know of anything else that actually does.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I was chatting to Joe Simpson about this right at the start of lockdown, and we were talking about the community that climbing produces, and it is fairly unique.
Yeah.
So I walked into here, I've not been in here for years. And of course we've got Paul who manages and kind of owns and runs both this facility and one in Glasgow. I've not seen Paul for years and years and years, and bang, we're straight into conversation.
Yeah.
There's a bit of jesting, and it is so good to have that community.
Absolutely.
From climbing.
And this place, TCA for me is it's like a youth club as well.
Well, it is a hub.
It is a hub
that pulls people together.
Yeah.
And certainly now in the environment that we find with the pandemic and COVID, to have places such as this opening up again is
incredibly important. Yeah.
So I've got to say, so training, you have always been a training fiend.
Yeah.
Even before I knew you, you've always been super ripped. You've always been very focused on your training, but it's not always been like that, has it? I remember you saying once at school you carried a few extra pounds.
Yeah.
Where did the switch come?
Well, I think, I was all, at school I was into rugby, I was always in sort of building muscle and getting into fights, and I was terrible at school, I never, I left school at 16 and didn't do any GCSEs really, or, I was really, really bad with all that. And for me, I think I just realized that actually, climbing isn't like a natural thing for me. I have to work really hard to be good at it. And I'm not scared of hard work when it comes to climbing because it is my life. And I think there was definitely a switch that happened in terms of the fact that, right, I want to climb the hardest that I can possibly push myself to climb. Because I'd hate to be in a situation later in life thinking, do you know what, I wish I climbed 9A, or I wish I climbed E10, and to know that I didn't give 100% to try that, for me, would feel like I let myself down. And
but why climbing and not? So you said at school it was rugby.
yeah.
So why was it climbing, and why aren't you playing for Saracens or Gloucester or whoever it may be?
Well, I think it was climbing because of because it was something. It gave you something that was unique, and you know, unless you go climbing,
yeah, it's very hard to describe.
You will not kind of like necessarily understand it. But when you do go climbing, even once, you will understand it, and that is where it's such a cool thing, for sure.
Yeah, and that bond transcends sort of nations, cultures, religions. It's right across the board, and you can bump into somebody in the far-flung Himalaya who perhaps you've never met before, and you have that commonality of climbing, that bond that comes through the rope.
Yeah. Because the community is still sort of fairly small, really. I mean, you know,
it is, yeah.
It's getting bigger.
It's absolutely, because I remember sat at Everest Base Camp once, and Everest is very commercial, and you know, we talk about commercialism in the mountains in a minute. And this is probably 2005 or 6, and Simona Moro was there, the Italian climber. And I went around for a cup of tea one day, and he was very, very inclusive. So he kind of brought me in. And on one hand, he would be very dismissive of the clients who were there for commercial. But he said to me, "Oh, no, you are a real climber. You are a real climber. I can tell because of your fingers."
Yeah.
And I always thought I had sort of non-climbing fingers, but I've got quite thin, spindly fingers. But he said, no, I can see something in you. And straight away, that bond was formed.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I see Simona once in a blue moon, and bang, it's there. It's always there.
It's always,
it's the power of climbing.
It's an amazing thing, and it's.
I wonder what it is though. It's quite. I used to play a lot of team sport, and you don't. There is a bond in team sport, but it's not quite the same.
I think it's because the experiences, the intense experiences, and I think. If you climb outside, you probably feel it more potentially because the experiences outside can be really intense. You know, you're taking care of each other. You can get into some situations which are life-threatening potentially. You're making really tough decisions, and I think it's that just brings you together, for sure.
So you're training. We were talking downstairs earlier, and I didn't realise this. So you've been plant-based for about 5 years now, because you are, I'm going to put it out there, in the past you've been notorious for having pretty poor diet.
What, in terms of not eating?
Yeah, in terms of not eating, using loads of supplements. You used to use some fat burner called Thermobol or something. But Brace and I were talking about this, and when driving here today, I was trying to think, what did Matt eat when we were, all sharing an apartment in Monsanto? And I can't actually remember you eating. But downstairs we were saying that you're plant-based now, and you're seeing the benefits, and you're feeling the benefits. So just talk us through the switch that occurred there.
Well, I think it's, I think when I really started to get more into performance with climbing.
I think last time we talked diet, you were dabbling with a paleo.
Yeah, that's right.
Diet at the top of cherry.
I've been trying absolutely everything.
Yeah, because I was eating an ice cream, and you were like, "No, I'm not touching that."
But I've really found it quite fascinating, actually, sort of like like experimenting with your body in terms of how, what foods make you feel one way or another, and or how much calories make you feel one way or another. And we all know that, climbing, particularly if it's hard rock climbing we're on about here, is basically, it is about sort of strength to weight ratio. So that's an important aspect. So the lighter you are, the harder you better pull. That's normal. So I did kind of put a lot of research into the whole dietary thing. I did the whole keto thing. I did the whole high carb instead of low fat, and I mixed it all up entirely. And then I basically just then also from an environmental point of view, I was flying around a lot as well at that point, and I thought I need to kind of reduce my carbon footprint. So I then also went and looked into the whole sort of veganism and in terms of the benefits environmentally, but also from a performance point of view as well. And there's a very good cookbook, Thrive. It's a really good sort of vegan cookbook done by some triathletes.
I've not come across that one.
I can't remember his name now, but yeah, that's the cookbook of Thrive. And that was quite motivating as well. And I think certainly for me, you know, I was introduced to good food, you know, vegan food. I learned a lot of lessons in terms of cooking. I'm sort of a really bad cook, but I try.
Because our time in France together, I think the only thing I ever saw you cook would have been pasta, peas and pesto.
Yeah, but that's what we always lived on, wasn't it?
Well, no, because I used to eat with Grandad, so we used to have big salads and things like that, and you were diving into your pattern. You must have been on a high carb. I can't remember.
I must have been back then. But this is the thing, and this is what is quite interesting, is the fact that it's like we spoke about, like, you know, these next few years, I'm really trying to focus on my rock climbing. But it's because I feel that there's a stopwatch ticking for me to actually perform at a really high level in that. And I then also made the decision that then, you know, but then during this period of time, I still really want to then, you know, build my mixed climbing still. I love my Scottish winter climbing, absolutely love it. I'm really passionate about that. I love my winter alpinism, and I love doing expeditions. But because of trying to perform at this high level, you know, that's kind of had to take a little bit of a back seat for a couple of years, I would say. But then the idea behind it, and my sort of game plan, if you like, is that when I've hit my maximums, I'll be content. I want to climb E10 and I want to climb 9A.
So how, when you say you've hit your maximums, you hit them, how do you know you can't go that little bit further?
Well, that was the worry, because when I climbed 8C, I was thinking, I'm not going to climb 9A. And then there is that little thing going, climb 9A, you know what I mean? Or when you climb E8, you're like, oh, I'm not going to climb E9. But I think also at the same time, you know, I have to be realistic as well. And I think for me, those would be my absolute maximums in rock climbing. But what is really cool, and you know this all too well as well, is that in terms of alpinism, you know, people have done great things in big mountains, like way into their like 50s, way into their mid 50s. Yeah. So I've planned my life to basically try to do these performance things now, and then once that's done, then I'm back on expeditions. I've got, you know, some really sort of big dreams for routes in the Himalaya that I'd love to go and do, and sort of, you know, and do more sort of alpinism again, basically.
It's quite interesting. I'm in the process of writing another book, and I was researching literally only today about Messner.
Yeah.
And Messner did say, I'm going to get it wrong, but he was saying 30s into the 40s, when you get to like your 50s, that's when it all starts tailing off in terms of your capability in the big mountains.
Yeah.
So you are quite scientifically looking at it, whereby you've got another 4 or 5 years to hit your maximums. Yeah. And then you're going to try and translate that to the big mountains.
Then I've got another four or 5 years to hit my maximums in the big mountains.
And how do you think you're going to keep the as the Americans would say, the stoke alive?
The thing is, man, I mean, climbing has always been my life, and I'm so passionate about climbing, and motivation to come here and train for like, you know, 11 hours a day, every day, is never, ever been a problem. You know,
how many coffees you get through in that 11
quite
hours?
A few, mate, yeah. But these guys are really kind to me here, so. Yeah, I've never ever found like motivation a problem ever, and you know, and I think it's really important to have goals, to have short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals. And I have all those things written down. You know, I have a book and I have them written down in my kitchen at home in Chamonix. I've got them written on the wall, like my goals for the next 10 years, and they're from like rock routes to alpine routes to expeditions, and I'm meticulously ticking through those things. And if you wake up every morning and you see those goals, that kind of gives you a bit of a kick up the ass to actually say, right, I need to crack on, and this is what I'm working towards. The thing is also, in saying that, you have to sacrifice a lot. And I have sacrificed a lot in terms of, I mean, relationships get sacrificed. Yeah, it's a very selfish, self-centered thing. But that's just how I am, and you know, I don't know if I'm going to change. I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, that's quite a big omission, and
Yeah,
you know,
it is.
Part way to recovery, you know, especially through addiction, and by the sounds of it, you are addicted to climbing.
Yeah,
There's
absolutely.
a lot of things out there which is a lot worse to be addicted to, but you are addicted to climbing.
Yeah.
The way to recovery, the first thing you've got to do is admit to yourself what the issue is.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if I'm honest, I don't think I'll ever be satisfied, and that's the problem. I mean,
so if you're not going to be satisfied, how do you know you're going to hit your maximums? Are you going to be satisfied with 9A E10?
I think I've tried to convince myself I'll be satisfied with that, but then I'm not going to like hang up my boots then. Then I move on to the next phase. Then I move on to these bigger routes in the bigger mountains.
Yeah. Oh.
But then, you know, will I be satisfied with even that? I don't know. It's like when I did Reissue, you know, like I remember being on top of the cliff. I'd given everything to actually do it. It was a childhood dream to do it. And I remember just like, you know, letting out so much energy at the top of the cliff, just like I was in tears at the top.
Yeah, there's some fantastic photographs of you at the top.
Yeah, it was so emotional. My friends were there as well, and they'd been part of the whole experience. And I thought, this is gonna satisfy me, you know. And that moment, unfortunately, lasted until the following morning, you know. Wow. And then I was okay now. Yeah, it's not E10 though, is it? Maybe I need to go and look at the E10 up the road, you know? And that moment of like satisfaction was tiny. And that is the problem. And I really wish I could, I really wish I could be satisfied, but I don't know.
But maybe it's then that you have, because there are some famous climbers, Jerry Moffat being one, Andy Pollitt being another, and they both tell the same. Well, Andy Pollitt unfortunately is no longer with us, but both tell essentially the same story. And for Moffat, it was he had just repeated a very hard boulder problem in South Africa, and he was sat on top of the boulder apparently, or according to his book, he sat on top of the boulder watching the sun go down, and he has the epiphany that he's never going to be able to climb that hard again, because the sacrifice he's had to put in to keep his form and his power, he says it just wasn't worth it. And Pollitt was the same. When Pollitt eventually climbed Punks in the Gym in Australia in a Rapides, which at the time was, what is it, 8B plus? 8B plus,
I think maybe.
Which at the time was one of the hardest routes in the world. He didn't quite get the first ascent, but he bolted it and he tried it over many, many months. He finally did it, and both of them gave up climbing. Because they said, that's it, I'm never going to climb that hard again, so I'm not interested.
Yeah. But I honestly think this is the problem with me, because I am an all-rounder, and I'm not just a sport climber or a trad climber or an alpinist. I'm an all-rounder. And the problem with being an all-rounder is that, you know, there is always the next thing, you know. And like I said to you, I think it's, you know, when I have things so mapped out in my, you know, in my mind in terms of what I want to do in the next 10 years, it doesn't make that whole thing that easy, really.
But then do you have the danger of you're putting potentially too much emphasis on the destination?
Yeah.
If you don't achieve E9, because over the last couple of seasons, or longer than that, maybe last 5 years, so you've been struggling with a series of finger injuries.
Yeah, yeah.
I assume that's a case of pulling very hard on very small holes, and your body is beginning to creak.
Well, absolutely, and you know, I came back here to basically train solidly for like 5 weeks before I go back to Switzerland to get on my 9A project there. I came back here, really psyched to train. 3 days in, tweaked my finger, and that was kind of like really I was really destroyed by that, like sort of mentally.
And when you say tweak your finger, we should explain it. It's one of your...
Yeah, the pulley.
Yeah,
so there's
the tendons inside.
Yeah.
You've got A1, A2 pulleys.
Yeah.
And climbers, well, not often, but when they relatively often,
yeah.
And when they can go bang.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard them go bang
like
in a climbing wall.
Pop, isn't it? Yeah.
And you know straight away.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't climb anywhere near it, but I have popped a tendon.
Yeah.
And
you've only got
hurts like hell.
And you've only got to like just touch anything again, and you're like, oh, that's gone, that's gone. And then, you know, and when I put so much into basically coming here and just training and then having an injury straight away, that was really tough actually.
So how do you deal with that I mean, knowing that you are a training fiend, we've said that. Training / climbing is your life, and I know you run, or you used to run a lot. I mean, you got some awesome marathon. Was it 2 hours? It's sub 2.5 hours, isn't it? Yeah. How do you deal with that sort of setback? How do you train around a busted pulley?
Well, this is what's been really, really cool. Is that, you know, I've always trained myself, but to get to these final points of goals, I thought I need to eke out a little bit more percentage in terms of my performance, and I needed to bring in some professionals basically. So I got the guys at Lattice Training involved, and I went and saw them before I got injured, and I said, listen guys, help me out with a couple more bits of percentage just to, like, you know, get me to this thing. And they put you on a machine and they kind of like test your pull strength, they test your power endurance, your strength, like on one arm. They look at your mobility and in your power and all this sort of stuff. And then they basically build this plan around all this data that they've got. It's an amazing setup. And my coach really kind of has helped me massively through this stage, I have to say, because we wrote a plan out after going and doing this sort of data analysis assessment. Before he gave me the plan, I was a little bit too excited, and that's when I tweaked my finger. And then the next day he's like, well, I've got your plan. And I'm like, but I've tweaked my finger. And he's like, okay. So we're gonna have to like rethink your plan now. And these guys have been amazing because they've basically said, right, Matt, what you need to do now is you need to do loads of my hips are terrible. So you need to do loads of mobility work. You can still do a lot of pull work on the bar. We can start introducing a bit of loading onto the fingers to build back strength, because it used to be like, okay, you got a finger injury, maybe don't use your fingers for a month. That's not the way of thinking now. It's basically let the swelling go down and then start increasing load to the fingers by adding weight on the fingerboard. And these guys have been great. I mean, I've been phoning up my coach going, yeah, well, my finger, you know, I can add like 5 kg and I can add 10 kg and then 15 kg. And he's like, yeah, let's just calm things down. Don't go, because I'm always like, oh, can I go a bit harder? He's like, no, don't go harder, you know, rein it in a little bit, you know. And having these guys have actually been massive for me mentally, actually. And that's what's kind of got me through this stage. And now, only in the past 2 sessions, I've started to feel that, okay, my finger's actually starting to feel better again. And, you know, I can start using it a little bit more. So I'm seeing like a light at the end of the tunnel. And I'm hoping to think that maybe in like 2 or 3 weeks' time, that finger will be better. And I can get on my project, and I can basically start to try to pull the pieces together to try to eventually, hopefully do it.
Now, you talk about your enthusiasm there. You are known to be one of the most enthusiastic people on the planet. Hence the name. I mean, we nicknamed you for a while. The Woof Woof, because you're like a young golden retriever, like, you know, super. You throw a ball, you're like, oh, go over here, no, I'll go over there, go. And you are. It's almost impossible to rein your enthusiasm in. So it must be a bit of a living nightmare for a coach.
I think
to try to keep you on a program and for you not to sort of overload your training. Yeah, I can see you doing that.
Yeah, I mean,
on a daily basis.
Absolutely, and I was on the phone to him going, yeah, I think give me more load. I think, you know, it's like, well, I'm still giving you, you know, like 14 hours of training a week plus, you know, and that doesn't include the warm-ups, you know. He's like, I think that's enough. I'm like, no, give me more. I want more because, you know, I'm so motivated to try and get better. And he's like, no.
But you've always been like that. We climbed in Cheddar once years ago, and And then you went to the gym. So we climbed all day, and then you went to the gym and you banged out 15 kilometers on the treadmill, after a day's climbing.
Yeah, well, that's why
you've always been relentless.
But that's why I'm also really stiff and really creaky, and I get injured all the time, probably, because my body is also kind of like going, whoa, just settle down a little bit.
And whereabouts is your project in Switzerland?
It's at a cliff called Raoul,
right.
which is actually only about 2 hours from Chamonix. But it's a beautiful south-facing limestone cliff.
And is that going to be climbable in the winter?
Yeah, well, it's at 2,000 meters, so
it's pretty high.
Yeah, snow will come. It's very near Crans, Montana.
Yeah.
And so basically, I've got a window of, I would be there now if I wasn't injured. But so my window is going to be like end of September, October, possibly into November. Yeah. And then it will get like too cold, or when the snow comes, I won't be able to get the road. But then again, I'm thinking, well, okay, if I go there and I get the numbers on it, I work out the sequences, then I can then go mixed climbing in Scotland this winter, do some alpinism in the Alps, which won't affect my power too much. I won't go on an expedition and get weak, which, as we all know, makes you weak.
Well, yeah, I know.
And then I'll then try again and try and send it in the springtime. That's the plan anyway.
And you don't find that going away and doing, because a lot of the top climbers will essentially chase the seasons around the world, and they are constantly climbing. One of the, I wouldn't say quite unique, but one of the great things about you, as you mentioned, you are an all-rounder. You love Scottish winter, you love alpinism. Do you not find that even hanging out in Scotland or in the Alps in winter, does that not affect your power?
Yeah.
I mean, but power does dip off relatively quickly.
And that is the thing. I mean, I'd love to say that I could put all that to one side, all the winter climbing.
So you're not going to jet off to Thailand?
No. I mean, it'd probably do me some good, if I'm honest, to get these things done. But because I am so passionate about alpinism, skiing, and mixed climbing, I do feel that that's something that I still really want to be doing in the winter time, and I just have to basically manage my fitness around that. So I always travel with a hangboard, so I've always got that in my bag, so I can keep my fingers topped up. If I'm climbing in Scotland and the conditions are bad, I'll go to the local wall. I might even drive down to Ratho, and have a session down there. Rock shoes always go everywhere with me. So I try to kind of keep things balanced, but yeah, absolutely right. As an all-rounder, to try to perform at a high level in everything is a nightmare, because it's kind of always, whatever you're doing in one aspect is counterproductive for the other.
It's a negative in the other.
Yeah.
So you get your big legs, and there's not going to be very good for hanging.
Yeah, exactly. You do all this skiing, or you're skinning into a route in the Alps, and your legs are like strong, and you're like, wow, and get to the route, and you're fit and whatever. But that's the thing at the moment. I know for a fact that I've not been doing a lot of cardio, so I know like my first few routes this winter in the Alps or in Scotland, I'm going to be like absolutely boxed, like walking into the cliff, and then I'll be fine when I get climbing, but then actually getting there, I'll be destroyed,
And just tell us. So we, I think, Cool Conversation 18, we had John Bracey on. You've had a phenomenal partnership with John over best part of the last 10 years or so.
Yeah.
Try to explain the synergy that the two of you have, because you are quite different individuals. John's quite quiet, perhaps a little bit introspective. I wouldn't quite say a deep thinker, but and then on the outside, you're this high energy. You love your loud music and your training and everything that goes with that, this almost larger than life persona. So just explain the synergy that the two of you have found over the years.
Well, I think, I think we're very good together because I think, for a start, John is incredible in the mornings and I am terrible in the mornings. And I'm pretty good at night, and John kind of starts to dip off at night. So we basically, so that aside, we complement each other very, very well. And I think, we've climbed with each other, for many years. We've done some amazing new routes together, many new routes together across the world. and I think we just have that partnership that we spoke about in terms of that energy. And for sure, you know, we know each other very, very well from our climbing perspective. And in terms of the fact that if I'm having a bad day, John will crack on. If John's having a bad day, I'll crack on. And there's never any sort of like discussion or, is this your pitch or it's my pitch? It's like, you know, it's like, no, I'm feeling good, I'm going. Or like, you know, mate, you know, it's all yours. My mind's all over the place. Yeah, it's all yours. And having that sort of like, like, you know, there's no judging of us ever. You know, we've done a lot of cool stuff together, and as I said, we've been in a lot of very difficult situations together, and we've never had a crossword, and it's always been very, very calm when we climb. We don't also really need to kind of have much of a discussion in a lot of the decisions that we make in the mountains. I must admit, you know, I do sometimes feel like I've got to like rein John in a little bit, and I feel, because John has kids, and a wife, I don't, and John's always very sight, and I sometimes do have this thing like, oh, I need to just be a little bit like protective here for John.
Wow, that's quite interesting.
And I remember that kind of really became quite a thing for me, like when he did have, not necessarily, like, you know, when he had kids, it kind of made me sort of think, you know, yeah, okay, you know, I'm, you know, they're not my responsibility, but, you know, I do feel that, you know, it's kind of a shared responsibility when we're in the mountains, because I want John to be safe.
Yeah,
obviously. So I do feel sometimes I'm the one going, are you sure about this, John? He's like, yeah, I think we're fine. You're like, well, are you sure? Okay. And, you know, and so I can be, I can feel, you know, that, you know, I'm the one sort of trying to kind of calm things down sometimes. But we have a very good partnership, and I think, like I said, you know, we just complement each other very, very well, because, you know, John's a great alpinist, and yeah, we just don't really ever have to have a discussion when we're out. It's always very natural. You know, we always, you know, like John's tiny and I'm, you know, and it's like.
Yeah, you kind of second guess what the other person's going to do before they even think in it. Exactly. So you have that deep connection, almost telepathy between one another.
Absolutely. And that comes with sort of many years of climbing with each other.
It's meaningful relationship. It's not a transactional relationship. It's not something which is very shallow. It goes much deeper.
It does.
And that comes from those shared experiences that you mentioned.
Yeah.
And being the top of your game.
Yeah.
And being confident.
And there's definitely roots, and I'm sure
trust with one another.
Yeah. And there's definitely roots, and I'm sure John's the same. That, you know, I would consider doing with John that I wouldn't consider doing with other people. And me and John both have like tick lists of new routes we want to do, and, you know, we always share those with each other, and we're also very, like, you know, respectable with each other on that. Like, you know, it's like, okay, you know, I've got an idea, yeah, you know, that's our idea, we're going to go and do that, or you know, we don't go doing it with other people, you know, and a lot of that just comes down to the fact that we know that when we do climb together, we've probably got quite a good chance of getting up it, because we're a really strong partnership. Yeah. And probably, yeah, within the last 10 years, I mean, in terms of a British pair, I mean, we've probably done more new routes in the Greater Ranges than anyone I know in the Alps, new routes.
Oh, so certainly the Alps and perhaps Alaska and places,
Brits,
for sure. Yeah,
Brits.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
No, it's been a very, very productive
it's been good
partnership.
Yeah.
And then we were talking about earlier about your diet, plant-based diet, and I'm pretty much plant-based at the moment. And I get this all the time about, well, how are your energy levels and protein, and we won't dive into it too much, but clearly you're not finding it an issue in the mountains.
No, I'm not actually. I'm just making sure. I mean, at the moment, I'm cutting back on a lot of calories at the moment, to be honest.
That's not going to hold you in good stead in the mountains.
Not in the mountains.
You're going to end up freezing to
and
death.
This is why it's so counterproductive, you know. But then what I will obviously need to do is start taking a lot more in when the winter comes. For you know,
you have to drink some beer.
I have to drink some beer. God, I'll be absolutely hammered, mate. I've not drunk anything for quite a while. Yeah, I haven't the last 5 minutes. But it's quite interesting.
When I first saw you downstairs, pretty much the first thing I said to her, you're looking thin.
Yeah.
And you are trying to shed a few pounds.
Yeah, I mean,
a few grams even.
Yeah.
For your project.
Yeah, for the project. Yeah, I'm probably on about 800 calories a day at the moment.
800 calories a day.
Yeah, and I log it all, so I know I'm on that. Yeah, I've probably been on that for like the last sort of like 3 weeks or so. But I'm taking in quite high protein on that at the moment. So I'm trying to. So it's leaned me right out. But I'm still keeping like the minute amount of muscle mass, because obviously as climbers we don't want to be meatheads, you know. We need to be lean, and the muscle we have, it needs to be like usable muscle as opposed to like sort of big muscles that don't do anything.
And it'd be really fascinating because I'm hoping to have him on the show in the next couple of weeks. I mean, this comes full circle back to the big issue. You know, the first ascent of the big issue without bolts was John Dunn.
Yeah.
And John Dunn, I mean, I'm sure he won't mind me saying, he's a big boy.
Yeah, he's a big unit, yeah.
I mean, how does John do it? Is he just simply colossally strong?
Well, I think you'll find actually with what he does, he trains heavy. And that's the thing, is like, you know, when we train here, we train with like, you know, like a weight vest, or we have like, you know, I mean, like hangboarding with like 50, 60 kg off us, you know, hanging on like 20mm edges. But if John is naturally, you know, quite heavy anyway, he doesn't necessarily need to add that amount of weight. And then what I know he has done in the past, from what I've heard from people, is that then he just basically goes like a bit crazy with his calories in terms of not having much. And then you know, he's been used to climbing really heavy, and then suddenly he's really light, and he's like, oh my god, he floats.
But you can't have many calories less than that. I mean, 800 calories is not many calories.
It's actually really quite surprising, actually. Like, I put it into like MyFitnessPal, you know, that app. And I'm really meticulous in terms of like how much I take in, the weight and everything. And when you start putting it in, actually, yeah, you're right. It actually makes you realise that's not a lot of food.
No.
Not a lot of food. Whereas, you know, and you're like, well, it's only like...
I think I had more than that for lunch.
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, but also it makes you realise what you can operate on. And, you know, I think, you know, well, we all know most people overeat.
Oh, no, without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
I forget exactly what the figure is. It's going to annoy me now because I'm quite interested in that. Now, the average calorific intake in the UK is something like 3,500 calories.
Wow, yeah.
Which is 1,000 more than the recommended daily intake for an adult male.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It is a colossal amount.
And I think
at the same time, you have kind of flipped. I mean, is that sustainable?
Well, it's not sustainable, no. And the thing is you know, I know for a fact, as soon as the snow comes and I start going mixed climbing, as I said, you know, getting into the mountains is going to be like brutal. But then I'll basically then...
You might pack an extra carrot.
Exactly, I'll pack an extra carrot. But but I think, you know, yeah, for sure. I mean, at the moment, it's like, you know, you have to be a little bit honest with yourself in terms of the way it's like, you know, do I have an eating disorder at the moment? And I probably do, actually, if I'm being honest with myself, because of the fact that it's like, it is quite obsessive, and a lot of climbers, you know, have had that.
Yeah. Well, a lot of climbers are obsessive. In one way or another about something. Yeah,
and when you know that something is so makes such a difference, you know, it does become a thing, and I am trying to be careful that it doesn't become a real obsession in terms of me not having much calories at the moment, because I want to be light. So, but I'm hoping, because of the fact that I know that I'm going to go into mixed climbing and alpinism, that will save me, because I can't like survive on what I'm eating now to try and hit my maximums in my rock climbing.
Yeah.
Whereas if I was just focusing on rock climbing and was just a sport climber, I can totally see how it's like a slippery slope. and you'd be just suddenly going, man, I do have an eating disorder.
Well, I mean, it's a fine edge of balance in there, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it really is. Yeah, and I really think it's and a lot of friends I know have been like, Matt, you know, is everything cool? I'm like, yeah, it's all cool. I've got this.
It's interesting though, sort of just sat here chatting. I can tell your eyes are sparkling talking about it. It's something that it does excite you.
Yeah.
The fact that you are experimenting or playing with your nutrition, your calorific intake, in order to hit these long-term big ambitions.
Yes, but I also think that actually when you kind of get your body into such a state that you feel the subtle differences massively. And like for me now, if I go out and I have like eat badly, I will feel that. I will feel my performance and I will feel terrible about it. And that's why the human body is such an amazing thing. And I think when it's like tuned in a way, and when it is running quite light and quite on empty, then I think then it really does pick up more.
Oh, so, it's more responsive.
Exactly.
It almost fell off the back of my chair there. It's a little bit like a racing car. You've got a Formula 1 car, you've put the wrong fuel in, it's got a cough, splutter, it's not going to perform. And the thing that I think many people lose sight of is we do unfortunately abuse our bodies with inadequate diets. I mean, the average diet for many people is there's way too much saturated fats, there's generally too much protein, they're carb heavy, and there's not enough fresh green vegetables. I mean, it's endless. And that not only dumbs down the body's performance, but it can lead to long-term critical health issues.
Absolutely, and I think, and for me, what I find was really interesting is that I do get blood tests and I check to see where my levels are in terms of my magnesium or my iron or my B12. And that's very interesting because obviously it gives you a bit of an idea in terms of where you need to supplement, for example, as opposed to just supplementing for the sake of supplementing.
Well, I mean,
which is what I used to do.
Well, and you used to do it quite randomly. I seem to remember.
It was random, mate.
We take this thermoball. It's a fat burn. It's going to make me climb really hard. And next thing you know, I'm all over the place. Because generally, plant-based diets, if you have a wholesome plant-based diet, you don't need to supplement at all, other than B12. That's the one thing that seems to be commonly accepted. And I mean, we've had many people on the show now who either dabble with or are plant-based, and generally, they all say the same thing. If you're on it, then energy levels, protein levels, etc., has not been an issue at all.
Absolutely, and I think certainly, I mean, and that has opened my eyes up in terms of like cooking well, and I do, I'm what it used to be like. But
I'm struggling to believe.
No. I'm quite a chef now, mate.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I'm quite a chef. Yeah. No, like at the moment my dish is like
not much. What it sounds.
No. I'm really into like but like small amounts, but like kale, spinach, seeds, roasted almonds, proper turmeric, like proper slug turmeric. Smash all that in. Engevita.
Well, smash it into what?
Well, into that.
Because I put all that into a smoothie.
Okay.
A couple of times.
Okay, so you
so you drink ginger.
Yeah. Well, I kind of just like heat that up a little bit and just have that
munch on a leaf.
Yeah. But actually, and the thing is, I really like the taste of that as well.
No. Yeah. You're absolutely right. I mean, but as soon as you start experimenting with sort of fresh green vegetables and seeds, and you roast the seeds, it is incredibly flavoursome. I mean, I've been plant-based throughout lockdown, and without fail, that the food that we eat is not only sort of super nutritious, it's incredibly flavoursome, it's good for the body, and it's good for the planet.
Absolutely.
There's no getting away. I think George Monbiot was on the Frankie Boyle show, and George Monbiot being the sort of environmental activist, I suppose you would call him, and he was saying it's all well and good talking about single-use plastics, but the three things that we can really make an impact on in terms of trying to save the planet on an individual level is one, fly less, and I'm certainly guilty of that. I know in the past you have.
Yeah.
Number two is think about where we get our power from. And number three, and this is something that we can all do, is essentially eat more plants and less meat. And you don't necessarily, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago on a show, we don't necessarily need to go meat free, but just think more consciously about your choices.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, let me say, I don't have a problem with people eating meat. I think, you know, if you eat meat, it's just more important, I suppose, to where you get it from. You know, but I think everyone has like a responsibility these days to actually be a little bit more, just a little bit more honest in terms of where they're actually, you know, buying their food from, and to understand that actually those things do make a really, really big difference. But actually, it makes a big difference to the planet, but also it actually makes a big difference to you and your body, and you just feel so much better for it as well.
Absolutely, and that sort of segues us very nicely to Patagonia, who one of your principal sponsors over about the last, 20 years almost?
25 years almost.
So 25 years now.
Yeah.
You're one of their sort of probably in the top 10 of the sort of the main
one of their
ambassadors.
global athletes,
and Patagonia, I think most of the listeners, viewers will know, pretty much the benchmark, certainly outdoor brand in terms of sustainability, ethical choice, environment.
Absolutely.
And you were posting quite a lot recently about a new campaign that they've been on.
There's a new campaign about regenerative agriculture, which is all about soil, basically. That is a new campaign that they're pushing at the moment. And there was a very interesting, if you go onto their website, there's a very interesting information about that whole topic. It's very interesting in terms of where, you know, Patagonia are very good at educating. You know, I'm not an expert in that field at all. You know, I'm not, am I an environmentalist? I mean, I respect the environment, I try to take care of it. Am I an activist? Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm doing a project in Cheddar Gorge at the moment to try to re-green the gorge. But
you are consciously aware.
I'm very consciously aware of stuff.
The environment.
Absolutely.
I think most climbers probably are.
I think most people are, and I think most climbers are, like definitely going down that route, and that's why I think Patagonia, and particularly at the moment, are seriously hot. You know, people love Patagonia, and also obviously, you know, for the brand, you know, recently. You know, their mission statement changed. It's less about outdoor and more about environmentalism, you know, issues. And I think, you know, it's the right way to go, you know, for sure. And I think for sure, you know, Patagonia still make amazing product, and we've been working on this new product that we've been testing. Which basically is using environmental materials in terms of the waterproof side of things. And we had this thing up in Scotland last winter to actually test this material out, and it just didn't quite work. And rather than them going, well, okay, we'll use something that like a C6 like fabric, you know, that isn't very environmental. It's very bad for people who work with that material. They're like, well, if we can't bring out this material that is environmental, then we'll just have to like hold the line, you know, rather than going forward with it. And for me, I've got such respect for that, because if it doesn't work and it's not going in the right direction, they won't do it. And I think, you know, there's a lot to be said for that, because I think a lot of people and a lot of brands would potentially be like, do you know what, let's just get it out there. So no, I mean, you know, I've been with the company a long time. I've seen a lot of changes. It's very, very strong at the moment. There's a great team. The guys in Amsterdam, which is where the European office is, are all fantastic. There's a really good vibe about the whole team, for sure. It's in a very good place, for sure.
It's really good to hear. I mean, I mean, Chouinard has always been this sort of aspiration. So Yvon Chouinard, the founder, and I suppose they're the founder of Black Diamond as well. Has always been quite an inspirational figure. I remember working in Snow and Rock, mid-90s, and Patagonia switched from plastic packaging for their Capitaine underwear to paper. And then as a byproduct, Chouinard sort of found that actually it was cheaper. It was done for environmental reasons, but it also turned it on its head, and sort of in terms of bottom line, of sort of profit margins, it turned out to be good for the company.
Be the right thing to do.
There's a very it did make putting the thermal, when customers took it out, it did make putting it back in the package so difficult. God, it was difficult working on a shop floor.
There's a very good book, Let My People Go Surfing. And I really recommend that book for anyone who's wanting to build a sustainable, happy company.
Culture. Culture. It's all about culture, which brings us back to the whole climbing thing again. It's the climbing culture.
Absolutely.
So we've always got to bring this show home at some stage. We do have poor Paul. It's kept the wall open for us. So we know what your short-term goals are. It's to try to climb 9A. The E10 is the one in view, in sight?
Yeah, there's one in Pembroke.
Okay.
There's one E10 in Pembroke.
Is that Timmy's route?
No, it's Neil Mawson's route.
Okay.
I can never pronounce it. Coronazon.
Yeah.
Coronazon.
Tim, is that the one that Tim has done?
No, Tim did Michael Lianti, and that's E9. He gave it E10, but it's now settled at E9.
Okay.
Yeah.
Scotland, I mean, Scotland's always a bit of a funny one. It's very hard to have plans in Scotland.
It is very hard to have plans, but I'm planning on being, obviously everything pending, but I'm planning to be up in Scotland quite a lot this winter. I don't know, Scotland is so unique, and for me, it really is the best mixed climbing on the planet. I mean, we can go mixed climbing in the Alps.
Which is fantastic.
But Scotland is different. It's just better. It's just better, and...
Matt tells you how it is. It's better in Scotland. Not many people say that.
No, they do. But I think also, the Alps make you quite soft because you generally go out in good weather.
Yeah, good weather. Yeah.
Very rarely do we have a map and compass out and have to navigate, Whereas in Scotland, we go out in all weather. You're going through different sort of temperature gradients, so it could be like hammering down with rain.
No, you get a car park. Yeah, it's windy, it's rain, it's
and then
warm.
you're rind up, and then you hit the freezing level, and then you're freezing cold, and then your jacket's wet from the walk up, and you're wet through, and then you've gone through a set of gloves, and you've got to go into your pack for another set of gloves, and then those set of gloves are wet because your pack's got wet from before,
and then you're meant to climb hard.
And then you've got to climb hard, yeah. So I really think Scotland is way better preparation for anything in the big mountains than doing a trip to the Alps, because you have to walk in. You're carrying heavy packs generally. The days out can be long. It can be hard. You're on belays for you can be on for hours and hours as your mate's suffering, sort of cleaning all the rime away from the rock. And it is just a magical place to climb. And I think that whole thing of it being so ephemeral as well, that obviously in Scotland, with the ethics, you're not allowed to climb in Scotland, when the rock is not rimed up.
Yeah, if it's bare rock, it's kind of taboo.
So, that whole thing of like climbing when the rock is rimed, it just looks incredible as well. And you're trying to, it makes you work really, really hard. And the climbing can be like serious, ran out. You're placing gear. It's a very ground-up ethic, and
it's pretty intense.
And it's intense, isn't it? It's just full on.
Intense, yeah.
And I think you can get onto the plateau, and then it's just like this wind and rain, and you've got to like navigate off, and then you're trying to work out how to navigate again, and all that sort of stuff. And I think So I mean, I'm really looking forward to Scotland this winter. And also, there's a few things I really want to do in the Alps as well. yeah, and kind of like, as I said, just build and build, and then have plans for, you know, we were going to go to Nepal this year, but then that obviously had to take as with all of your trips as well.
COVID put a
put
a knife in most of that.
Exactly, but yeah, I've got trips, like long-term trips that I really want to do. There's some specific things in Pakistan that I'd love to do. I'd love to go and try in the Himalayas when I'm a bit older. Yeah, like a couple of things in particular. I've always thought
Trango or anything like that. Oh, G4.
G4.
Yeah.
I've always thought G4. The Shining War, G4.
Yeah, Robert Shower and Kurtika.
Yeah. I mean, what a face that is.
It's still considered probably one of the hardest.
Yeah. Alpine style
ascents.
Absolutely.
That there's ever been.
I mean, that was done back in the 80s, wasn't it? I think it was 1980.
Yeah.
Around then. And yeah, that whole war for me is like fascinating, you know, and a lot of that just comes from that story of their epic time on that face, you know, and the style that they did it in. And that's the thing for me, you know, style really does matter in terms of how I climb. You know, I've never placed a bolt ever in the mountains. And all the routes that I've opened up have always been done placing gear, and my partner has always taken the gear out, you know, so, you know, I really think that whole thing of actually, you know, leaving the mountain like free and clean is actually really, really important. So the experience for the second ascensionist, third ascensionist down the road is still the same experience as the first ascensionist. Even though if you do a first ascent, then the second ascensionist knows it's possible.
Yeah, well, they've got the knowledge, which
yeah.
has been laid down.
Yeah, but the actual experience of the climb and the protection to work out is still the same. And that's what climbing is really cool. And
it's one of those odd things, isn't it? So sometimes there's more emphasis on the second ascent.
Yeah.
Because a route gains a reputation. It's almost like mythical. So I know he's been a bigger influence on you, Mark Twight.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mark Twight was arguably the best there's ever been at hyping a route. I mean, his routes were beautiful, they were visionary, they were hard, especially for the time.
Absolutely.
But he was very good at hyping the route, so it generated a reputation that quite often put off. A lot of his routes didn't receive a second ascent for years.
No.
Decades even.
And Mark has definitely been very influential for me, for sure. And I met Mark in Alaska. And we met actually in the Fairview pub in Alaska. And it was really cool because, you know, they say never meet your heroes, you know. And I met Mark and he was an awesome guy. Yeah. And ever since then, we've kept in touch. We're often texting each other. And he's often still sending me sort of like, you know, motivation. I mean, and for me, his books are very motivating. There's one book of his called Kiss or Kill. Yeah. And I mean, I'm really dyslexic. And I don't read books. I've read your book.
I bet you haven't.
No, I have actually. And I've read Grandad's book as well. Yeah. But the book that for me, like, you know, that I've read many a times is called Kiss or Kill, and it's Mark Twight's book. And I've just, and I have that in the van with me now. And whenever I need a little bit of motivation, I just kind of pick that up and I just read the stories. And like you said, and it was just edgy, well written.
Yeah, no, he was.
The music behind it as well, because obviously he was kind of into his music, and I'm very much into music.
Sort of anarchistic punk.
Exactly.
He had the long hair.
Yeah.
And he came into Chamonix. It was quite. So for people who don't know, I mean, he started up. I mean, he was cutting edge climber. Spent many years in Chamonix. It's all but giving up climbing. I think he's completely given up climbing.
Yeah,
now.
He hasn't climbed for a while.
Kind of one of his last big ascents was a Czech Direct.
Yeah.
On Denali, and then he got into training.
Yeah.
And set up Jim Jones.
Yeah. Still an absolute beast.
Yeah, I think he's segued out of Jim Jones now, but he does a lot in the film industry and things like that.
Yeah.
But still a huge influence on a lot of climbers, and you know, yourself and myself included.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really cool that, you know, that he does reach out to me and I reach out to him, and we only texted literally a few days ago actually. And that's really cool. And there's another book he bought out called Refuge, which is kind of more of like a picture book, But again, in that book, it kind of tells, I can relate to him very much because it kind of shows like almost mirrored image life in a way, of it being like all about climbing, and then what life is like without climbing, and then moving on to other things. Now I'm still stuck in the stage of just climbing, but maybe then I'll have to kind of like face what he faced later in life. I don't know, I hope not. But then with the book, there are some very short, influential quotes within that book. And again, you just have to kind of like, you know, flick through it and you're like, yeah, psyched.
Yeah.
And you know, it can be just before like a route, or it can be for like a training session.
Well, it was Twight who said style matters.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's Twight.
Yeah.
Matt, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure. As I say, I never know quite how to land these. It is late. You have a home to go to.
Well, I have a van.
You have a van. You're not going back to your dad's tonight down?
No. I'm kind of with the situation.
You're in the car park then.
Might be dossing in the car park tonight. But you have a family.
I've got a home to go to.
Yeah.
We can't close this without saying thank you once again to TCA.
Absolutely.
Lena's used this facility here. And I think it's quite interesting how you say that someone like Twight has been an inspiration to you and your climbing. You know, I can put my hand on my heart and say you have been an inspiration to me over these years. Your enthusiasm, and I suppose your generosity as well of heart. And I have no doubt that you are a huge influence on many people that come here, and people that see what you do on the rock, in the Alps, in Scotland, through your Instagram and various other things. So keep that up.
Thanks, man. But also I want to say actually, Kenny, that you were a massive influence for me. Like, you know, because there was like you, and there was like Rich Cross, and there was John Bracey, and you know, and you guys were kind of in that, and Nick, you guys were in that sort of scene, and I was always like the younger guy who was
the young puffwoof.
Yeah, I was all, you know, and so I was looking at the stuff that you were doing on like the south face of Denali, and on like the mini Moonflower, and the route on Annapurna 3, and you know, you were a massive influence for me. You were my like hero as well, Kenny. So I just want to make that perfectly clear that, you know, this is not like a one-way thing. You know, you actually really motivated me at a young age to do what I do now, and I want to say thank you for that, man, because like I've got a huge amount of respect for you, and I always have them.
Well, that's super kind, and before my head explodes, Matt, it's been a pleasure. Put it there, big guy. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. You can check out Matt and the stuff he gets up to on Instagram. It's Matt underscore Helliker.
Matt underscore Helliker. Yeah.
You don't really use Twitter, do you?
No.
It's pretty up.
Just Instagram.
And there's some fantastic images. So catch up with what he's up to there. Go and check out what Patagonia are doing. And don't forget, if you are in the Bristol area or Glasgow, TCA is the only place to come and train. So a big thank you for Paul on that one. I hope you enjoyed Cool Conversations this week. We'll be back next week, same time. Well, not the same place, but same time next Thursday. Thank you for joining us, and we see you soon. Keep it real.